Factor by grouping. You should have learned how to factor a GCF from a polynomial. In this lesson, you will learn to group terms and then factor the GCF from each group. Example number 1. You'll start by grouping the first two terms and the last two terms together. So you have 7x squared plus 28x. In the second group, you have 6x plus 24. You will not combine like terms. This process is factoring, not simplifying. So find the greatest common factor of the first group. Do prime factorization of 7x squared and 28x. Look for a variable first. They have an x in common. So we will divide 7x squared by x. That will give us a 7x to the first. Remember, when you divide by variables, you subtract their exponents. X divided into 28x is 28x to the 0. X to the 0 just equals 1, so that's really just 28 times 1. Now let's look for a number as the GCF. A 7 and 28 can both be divided by 7. 7 goes into 7x once. 7 goes into 28 4 times. So we can simplify this. 1x to the first is just x, and 4x to the 0 is just 4 times 1, which is 4. So our GCF is x times 7, or 7x. Our leftovers will be found from the bottom of our prime factorization, x and 4. Remember to use the sign in the original problem. Now let's find the greatest common factor of our second group. We have 6x and 24. Look for a variable first. 6x and 24 do not have a variable in common. So now let's do prime factorization. The smallest prime that will divide into both is 2. 2 goes into 6x 3x times, and 2 goes into 24 12 times. Continue to divide by primes. The next prime is 3. 3 goes into 3x 1 time, and 3 goes into 12 4 times. You can simplify 1x to be just an x, and 4, of course, is 4. Notice our leftovers do match and should match in each group. So our GCF of the second group is 2 times 3, which is 6. Our leftovers are x and 4. Again, remembering to use the same sign as the original problem. Once again, notice our leftover parentheses, x plus 4 and x plus 4 match. Let's look at example 2. This is a special case for this problem. So let's go ahead and begin by grouping our first two terms and our last two terms. This one's a special situation because the first term in the second group is negative. Anytime your first term is negative, you must factor out that negative. So 2x squared minus 9x, let's leave that for now. In the second group, because it begins with a negative, we must factor out that negative. When you factor out the negative, it will change the sign of all the terms in that group. So negative 6x squared will become positive, and positive 27 will become negative. Notice how the signs change from the original problem. They're now opposite of what they started out to be. Now let's find the GCF of each group. Look for a variable first. Our smallest exponent is x to the first, so that will be our common factor as the variable. X divides into 2x squared and gives you 2x to the first, decreasing that exponent by 1. And x goes into 9x and gives you 9x to the 0. X to the 0 just equals 1. Now let's look for a number. 2 and 9 have nothing in common, so you can't go any further. You can simplify. 2x to the first is just 2x, and 9x to the 0 is just 9, because that's 9 times 1. Let's find the GCF of the second group. We have 6x and 27. Look for a variable first. 6x and 27 do not have a common variable, so now we'll factor out a number. 6 and 27 are both divisible by 3. 3 can go into 6x and give you 2x. 3 goes into 27 and gives you 9. Once again, notice your leftovers match in each group. Let's write our answer in factored form. The first group had a GCF of an x. Our leftovers were 2x and 9. Use the sign that's in the step above. Our GCF of the second group was 3. Remember, we factored out a negative, so that actually will need to be a negative 3 from using the sign from the step above. Our leftovers 2x and 9. We have a minus sign in that group, and so that's what you need to keep in your leftovers. Those parentheses match as they should in this factor by grouping. Let's look at another example. Number 3. Once again, we'll talk about factoring out the negative. So our first group is 15x squared plus 30x. Our second group is negative x minus 2. Once again, because we see that first term is negative in that group, we will need to factor out that negative. Let's do that step first. 15x squared plus 30x, nothing will change. The second group, you'll need to factor out a negative, and it changes the sign of every term in that group. This was a negative x. By factoring out the negative, it now becomes positive. This was a negative 2. By factoring out the negative, it now becomes positive. If you do not factor out that negative, your leftover parentheses in the final answer will not match. Let's factor by grouping the GCF out of each group. 15x squared and 30x. Let's look for a variable first. They both have an x, so divide 15x squared by x gives us 15x to the first. 30x divided by x gives you 30x to the 0, which is just 30 times 1. Now let's look for a number. A prime number that can go into 15 and 30 is 3. 3 goes into 15 5 times. 3 goes into 30 10 times. Continue to divide by primes. 5 can go into both 5 and 10. 5 goes into itself once. 5 goes into 10 twice. You can simplify 1x to the first to just be a x, and you can simplify 2x to the 0 to just be 2. Remembering x to the 0 equals 1, 2 times 1 is 2. So our GCF is going to be x times 3 times 5, which is 15x. Our leftovers will be here at the bottom of the prime factorization. Now let's look at the GCF of the second group. We have an x and a 2. Look for a variable first. They do not have a variable in common. Now look for a number. They do not have a number in common other than 1. So if the GCF is a 1, you must use that. 1 goes into x and gives you x. 1 goes into 2 and gives you 2. Once again, notice your leftovers match at the bottom of the prime factorization. Bring down the negative you've already factored out. Our GCF was a 1 for that second group. And your leftovers are x plus 2. Once again, matching the leftovers of the first group. You should see that when factoring by grouping. Now practice some on your own. Number 4, press pause to try this on your own. Here's the factored work for number 4. Check your work. The final answer is 6x times x minus 1 minus 5 times x minus 1. Again, noticing the leftovers match. Did you remember to factor out the negative at the beginning? Example number 5. Again, try this one on your own. Press pause to work it out. Check your work for number 5. The final answer is x to the 4th times x plus 8 plus 1 times x plus 8. Again, the leftover parentheses match as it should with factor by grouping. Be careful in this problem that you factor out a 1 because the second group, x plus 8, has no other common factor. A 1 must be factored out. Number 6. Practice this on your own by pressing pause to work it out. Check your work for number 6. The final answer is 9x times 3x minus 4 plus 2 times 3x minus 4. Those leftover parentheses once again match.